Recording in progress. So we're going to start off, actually, we're going to spend most of the evening talking about the
substantial damage assessment process in appeals.
yes, we're going to spend the evenings talking primarily in appeals. So Denise is going to have a quick presentation for us, and then we'll do a Q&A session. If you have any specific questions, we'll address those this evening. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mark, do you need the microphone standing here or just when we go? What do you think?
Just when we go out.
Okay. Great, thank you. Hello, I'm Denise Anderson. I've certainly seen you in a couple of you in some of our previous commission meetings and perhaps community meetings. So if we've not met personally, I'd be happy to do so at the conclusion of this meeting tonight. I am currently serving as a director of community development, so we're responsible for zoning, planning, code enforcement, building, and permitting, of course. So we'll talk through several things. Some of this was discussed during last night's commission meeting, so if you had the opportunity to sit through that very long discussion, some of this may look familiar to you. But what I wanted to talk with you about tonight specifically is the damage assessment process and how it intermingles with our permitting process. So as we look at damage assessment, there are three things that go into our review, if you will, and that's damage assessment, actual cost of repairs, and then the building permit application process. So important to know is that as we move through this disaster and various phases of recovery, and as more and more information comes to us, certainly from communities, homeowners, and what they're experiencing in terms of actual damage, and what we're able to observe while out doing inspections, meaning building inspections and assessments, we're pivoting on almost a daily basis. In fact, commissioners, I have an update for you again this evening about a change that we've made effective this morning. So news flash for everybody. But we have daily operations meeting to talk through these things. So please know that any of the ideas that you have, what you're experiencing out there, what you're seeing, please feel free to engage with us, engage directly with your elected officials. We really are listening and trying to adapt as we move through this process. What we have learned most importantly is that FEMA really requires that we're consistent and that we apply our policies to the extent practicable across the entire community. So that when they come in, and they'll come in and evaluate our performance in the next couple of years and do an audit. When they come in, they're really going to be looking at how did we approach this? Were we consistent? Was there a thoughtful response? Did we document it? And was it applied across the entire community in the same manner? So we're making adjustments all the time. Our current areas of focus, aside from damage assessment, is shorter timeframes from intake to issuance of permits. And that process is indeed speeding up. If you're watching commission meetings very on in November, you saw that we had very, very poor performance, issuing very few permits per day. We are now issuing 34 permits per day on average, and that number is climbing all the time. And that's because we're making these adjustments as we move through. We're quite frankly just getting better at reviewing the information that we're seeing. We're also focusing on zero damage from flooding notifications. So we've been able to obtain, the term is NAVD, and I once knew the acronym, and it doesn't really matter other than it's a measure of ground elevation. So we've been able to obtain that information for the entire city, and for those properties that are at 7.2 feet ground elevation, we will be issuing notices of zero damage from flooding. I got an update from our building official this morning, and there are 553 properties that will receive that notification. I'm working through a couple of bits on that, but those letters will be going out next week. And those letters will replace any other letters that may have been previously issued, and any other previously issued letters will be removed from the property record in our permit system. The other things that we're working on is condo association notifications. Condo associations, do we have any condo? Okay, great. So condo units are kind of an interesting a challenge, or they were an interesting challenge for us. So you may have, if you went into the property appraiser's website and looked for your FEMA wind loss mitigation letter, you probably saw a statement that, at least early on, that they couldn't provide it, that they weren't provided for PUDs and condo units. And so that caused a lot of confusion. The property appraiser's office is now going through and applying a structure value to the entire structure. We're utilizing that information along with the number of stories that is comprised in that structure and making notifications to condo associations. So if you're in a building that's 4 stories or above, no problem, you're not going to be determined substantially damaged. All owners can move forward with repair permits without concern. 3 stories and above, we're recommending that the condo association get a structure value, a private appraisal, to ensure that condo units located perhaps on the ground floor do not inadvertently exceed a 50% threshold for the structure, and so on. So those notifications are going out.
It goes so on.
Yes, oh, certain. So if it's 2 stories, very similar, we're gonna look for water incursion from the roof or structure damage on the exterior to ensure that there's no other forms of damage other than, we know, flooding perhaps. And we'll also be looking at ground elevation and making recommendation to the condo association for what they can do as well. And we're putting a responsibility on the association to communicate with all unit owners.
What, I'm association, could you tell me what responsibility you're putting onto me? Because I don't know.
So it's very simply,
Simply.
but it's in the letter. Can I ask you how many stories in your condo unit?
1.
1 story. So 1 story units, the notification will go out to the condo association. We're gonna require photos of the roof and of all exterior walls to ensure that there was no water intrusion from above, no wind damage resulting in structure failure. And then because it's a single story, it's effectively the same sort of approach as a single family structure. So we're gonna need SISD or FEMA packet documentation for the entire structure, unless you can send us photos showing that it did not go above the water, that the receptacle. But it's more of a conversation with condo associations than we're able to have with single family, because there's some nuanced bits there given common areas and other things typically associated with condo units. But that letter will be going out to all associations.
I just want to get back in my home, so please.
I understand. Have you submitted for a building permit at this point or no?
Well, I don't know if we've done that.
Okay.
But, you know, as I said, you get these letters changed on the property appraisers with, it's now the 3rd letter, the letters are different every month. So what, we've gotten 3 different letters. So.
As a condo owner, you've gotten 3 letters?
My homestead at home.
Oh, on the FEMA wind loss mitigation letter, is that what you're talking about, or from the city?
The one that's on the property tax.
Understand, yes, they have changed their process. Again, they were not applying a structure value initially, and now they are. We could talk specifically about your condo association.
Well, I just want to know, what are we supposed to tell people to do? I mean, you know,
So
it's 3.5 months. We need to have some guidance here.
I understand, I really do, and I know I can only imagine how difficult this must be. So as a single story unit, it's effectively like any other single family home in that there's water incursion through flooding came into the home. We need to evaluate based on the height of that water, whether or not there's substantial damage. And that's done in coordination or and I'll get to this in just a moment, in calculation with the structure value. So very often, we're gonna recommend that you get a structure value appraisal on the entire structure, because that's how FEMA looks at it, on a structure basis, not a unit basis.
So we need to get a structure evaluation.
You do. That would be my recommendation, to
Okay.
boost that value so that you can move forward more confidently in repairs.
So what about the value that they gave me when I go on my homestead?
That is done through the property appraiser's tax assessed value, and it's an adjustment they make. And what we're finding, I don't think there's, I think without exception, any appraisal that we have seen for actual cash value appraisal has been much higher than what the property appraiser's website has. And so in most cases, all cases that I've seen so far, it's advantageous to get that private market appraisal.
So what if do you need a private market appraiser if your appraised property is well over what you need to fix it?
You do not, absolutely. So if all unit owners can, make those repairs to the units without exceeding that 50% threshold, there's absolutely no reason to get a structural value appraisal. So we'll talk about that in just a second, some of those if then.
When you're
kind of
saying
things.
structure value, you mean the condo or you mean the building?
The building. So in all cases, when I say structure, I'm talking about the entire building. And that truly has been the challenge with condos. It's only been in the last 3 to 4 weeks that the property appraiser has been putting out these structure values for the entire structure. Before it was this,
There's not one for the structure, there's only one for the condos.
it is applied to it is for the structure, except oddly, to your point, it's not attached to the condo association. It is attached to each unit owner telling you the structure value of the entire building. It's very confusing in my opinion,
So
but that's.
tell
what
me,
it's
is there
referring to.
different rules for condos that are conversion condos?
No, there is not. So it's any residential structure.
Okay.
Yep, actually any structure, but residential structures are looked at differently than a business. Now, it is a commercial structure, so a contractor is required rather than an owner builder. You're unable to do an owner builder permit. If it is a commercial structure or is being leased or sold or rented within the following year. So if you're an owner builder and you're planning to sell your home, you need to get a contractor. You can't do an owner builder permit. I'm gonna move on for just a second, but
Yeah,
if
I didn't expect you to bring this up like within the first 5
I,
minutes.
well, great. I'm glad to surprise. But we can get into more of that as I go through here, and it is just a few more slides. So just an update briefly on permits, and this isn't the focus of our discussion, but because all of these things eventually lead into you getting a permit, I just wanted to share with you the most recent data. So we have issued 1,256 permits, 300 of which are already closed out. People have gotten final inspections. And then I think the number is 769 that are in various stages of review. And we are moving much more quickly from intake through review and issuance of permits. Certainly, we hope to do better, always hoping to do better. And in some cases, it's limited by capacity. In other cases, it's limited by the information that we're receiving. We need to go back and forth to get additional information. So actual cost of repairs, this is the other element that goes in, right? So it's damage assessment, actual cost of repairs, and then the permitting process. So actual cost of repairs is your SISD, or formerly known as the FEMA packet, which we can't call it that now, but it really is a listing of all of the costs, real and your DIY or volunteer labor costs. So what FEMA requires is that you document labor costs for the things that you are doing or that your family is doing. All of those things go into the cost of repairs, even if that cost did not come out of your pocket. And that's FEMA's approach to make a determination of how much damage was done or what the actual cost of repair would be to return that structure to its pre-storm or pre-damaged condition. That's the requirement of FEMA. So please do utilize your own labor. We would love for you to save money, but we do have to capture that using reasonable labor costs. And if you pick up an SISD packet from us, you'll see information on how to find labor costs using Bureau of Labor Statistics data. So that's an accepted labor source for you to use, but that is a requirement of FEMA and the things that we have to do.
So your source is going to be something that you've established already on a per dollar hour, even for do-it-yourself people. Not every do-it-yourself person is equipped to the next person.
Right.
You know, so if you have a son-in-law or a nephew or whatever that has contractor level knowledge and the ability to do so, how are you calculating a per hour charge for that one versus a contractor?
So it's a great question. So you can use a construction laborer rate, which you'll find available on the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Yeah, and there's a link. We're telling you where to go to find that, and then you can just identify it. It's dated May of 2023, and I posed the question to FEMA, and they approved that as an acceptable source.
Okay.
So, but for the more skilled labor that may have been required,
correct.
So if you're submitting as an owner builder, as an example, you must supervise any trades workers that come into your home.
Yeah, right.
That supervisory work will have a different labor rate attached to that, and so you'll find that on the BLS.
All of that will be out.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep. So again, these are not actual costs. You're not going to be paying yourself to supervise that, but it has to be incorporated into the cost of repairs.
It needs to be reflected.
It does.
Okay.
It does. Yeah. So what's important here is now, if you are less than 50% value on an approved SISD package compared to your structure value, whether you're getting it from a FEMA wind loss mitigation letter on the property appraiser's website or through an appraisal, if your FEMA package, SISD review package is approved by our reviewers, is being appropriate, it seems to reflect costs, all these things that we're talking about, and it's less than 50%, we don't have to wait for a damage assessment letter. We can go ahead and issue that permit, and that's a new change, okay?
Okay. And I just want to qualify one. It appears that this is an evolutionary process for you guys.
It
It
is.
changes regularly. So what happens to people that try to get their situation straight with the prior letter? Now a new letter comes out and perhaps changes that.
And we'll get to
Are we
that.
grandfathered or?
That's the appeals process,
Okay.
yes. So what's important to note here, and I shared this with commission last night, is as we're going through all of this, what we're seeing with the data that's coming in, when we first experienced this storm, and I think a lot of you would agree, seeing the devastation throughout the community, we all wondered if we were gonna be over that 50% threshold, quite possibly, right? There was certainly angst and anxiety. And what we're seeing is, and I'm not going to give a prediction of where we're going to land, we're certainly gonna have some substantially damaged, but I think in the end, because of the property values that can be seen through, particularly through private market appraisals and those things, and because damages are typically limited, a lot of people have tile floors and don't need to replace those, some of those things.
Right.
What we're seeing is that most people are gonna be coming in well under the 50%. So we're gonna have, I think, a relatively low number that are actually substantially damaged at the end of this process. And that kind of evolution is what we're learning and experiencing.
One
as
more
we
final
move
question. I
forward.
promise not to dominate your questions. If you received a letter, for instance, that indicated, say, 52%,
Sure.
how did you justify that?
Well, I'll talk through that, and
Okay.
I wish I could tell you how the sausage is made, but I can only
Right.
tell you what looks like the ingredients are, right?
Okay.
Unfortunately, I'm not the wizard behind the curtain,
Yeah.
but I'm using a lot of mixed
Yeah.
analogies, so mixed metaphors.
I see
But
models in the back here somewhere tonight, right? No, I'm just joking.
it is a complicated process, and it is an accepted methodology for what they, and I hate to use this term for rapid assessment, because I'm
Right.
certain this feels anything but rapid to you all. But it is an accepted approach that is being utilized when you have a
Right.
disaster that's so widespread, such as we've experienced, not just here, but throughout the entire Pinellas County, and then of course across the southeast of the state.
Mhm.
So again, actual cost of repairs, we've hit on that one, and now we're gonna talk about a damage assessment. So two elements that go into this is, as I said, cost of repairs and structure value, right? Those two things are, cost of repairs need to be less than 50% of the structure value. And different methods can be used, but must be consistently applied citywide. The contractor that we're using, how this works is we put in a request, we knew we needed help, so much support needed. That goes into our emergency operations center request, went to the county, got elevated to the state because of its widespread nature. The state negotiated with a contractor, and Tidal Basin won the bid, if you would. And then we signed on under a memorandum of understanding for this service delivery. Now, we can all talk about how poor perhaps the service delivery has been. There's been a lot of discussion about that lately, but I think what's most important is that we understand that this is a process, and our goal is to make sure that we get it right at the end. And we're willing and wish to work with you to make sure that what you've experienced in terms of damage and repair is documented appropriately so that we can make the appropriate determination. So regardless of what the assessment data says, if you disagree with it, there's a process to open that conversation with us. So Tidal Basin is using the adjusted tax assessed value. That's the property appraiser's information that you see on their website. And then they're putting in computed damages, and these are the ingredients. So they go out there, they went out there and they had a checklist, and they said, okay, what I am seeing in terms of damage, and it does not mean that they entered your home. In most cases, they did not.
Problem.
They're utilizing information that they've seen either through a preliminary damage assessment. That's the work we did in the week following Helene and Milton, is we went out and documented heights of water, things like that. That had to be input into the system. That information was necessary to have this area declared a federally declared disaster area. That brought in all of the assistance that we then saw. So while the preliminary damage assessment was documenting damage of your homes, and that was ultimately utilized in some fashion for the damage assessment the tidal basin is doing, it was necessary for us to be able to receive the kinds of federal assistance that we've received from FEMA. So the computed damages, this is there roof damage? Is there structure damage? Is there a presumption of floor damage? We're seeing them presume 100% floor damage as an example, even though you had tile floors. They don't know that you had tile floors and they were able to be saved. So those, very often what we're seeing is the computed damages are greater than the actual cost of repairs, but it is resulting in some substantial damage determinations that ultimately will be reversed upon opening that process.
And you had indicated that using private appraisers are going to be a big asset to this. And just to point out one thing, I'm sure you're all familiar with appraisals. It sounds almost like how they arrived and justified these damages costs is based more on a product called a drive-by appraisal, which quite frankly isn't worth the paper it's written on because no one's seen exactly what you have. And that is pretty much what I'm hearing here. If they didn't come inside, they don't know what you had inside. All they know is what they see from the exterior, which that's not sufficient to reach a determination on something so important to people that would potentially leave them hanging out to dry based on a product that's just not viable for that type of situation.
I don't disagree with you at all. Okay. I don't disagree with you. The challenge, I think, and this is, the sort of decision-making process that we all had to go through to figure out how best to approach this with more than 3,000 structures damaged in the city, and very limited staff and capability to fit, that also is processing permits, to be able to go out there and do the kind of assessment that is certainly necessary, right?
Yeah.
Is infeasible.
Yes, ma'am.
It's infeasible. And we've seen, even with the approach that Tidal Basin has done, and they've had several hundred people now deployed throughout Pinellas County to do this, we're still waiting on information. So I can't tell you that there is a great process out there. I'm confident there's a better process and we're all learning. That said, the information that we are getting, as I said, it's the information that's going in. If they can't see, if they're making some assumptions, and some of it is false assumptions, certainly, as I've said, flooring is a great example. It's heavily skewing toward a higher percentage of damage. Okay. So I would certainly suggest that if anybody received a 52% damage assessment, that there should be no problem of getting that reversed into non-substantial damage. And there's ways that we can do that. We'll talk about
I
it.
have a question.
Yes.
I don't know if you're gonna explain later.
Yeah.
What if the owner, because the city department was closed for a while too. What if they start fixing the home that had no structural damage on the inside of the home before they were able to even ask for a permit?
So,
Because
first of
they had
all,
nowhere else to go.
sure,
Yeah.
I
They had
understand.
nowhere else to go live. So-
And I mean, as far as they have sewer, electricity and water, they're not living like animals or anything, but they needed to be on their home. There's no permits available because we were all closed, everything was closed for weeks. So what happened to that person? They're gonna come and make them open the walls to see if it's done properly or?
Yes, unfortunately, and I hate to say that. So if water went above your receptacles and therefore your wiring got wet, building code requires that it be replaced. So salt water is a corrosive material, and we've already heard stories of fires that started as a result of that. So even if it was dry, because it has salt water on it, it's going to corrode those metals and could potentially be a fire hazard. So I'm not naive. I understand many people, I can understand the instinct to go and fix that which is broken. I would say to you that you're gonna need a permit at some point. I don't wish to call it an after the fact permit, but the fact is you've already done the work. You're gonna need to come in and get a permit. We're gonna need to go out and inspect. It doesn't mean necessarily that we're gonna require that you rip out all of the drywall, but if you didn't replace the wiring, we are gonna require that. So, and that really is for your own protection. It's not because we wanna be difficult, but because it's required and it really is to protect not only you but your neighbors from fire. So, so get a permit. I will also share with you an insider secret is if you have an NFIP claim for flood insurance for damages, FEMA is sending us that information. And they are obligating us to then reach out to those homeowners who did not receive, or who did not pursue a permit. We have to go have a conversation with you. You made a claim for flood damages. You did not get a permit. FEMA views that as fraudulent activity. So you now need to get a permit to address that concern so that FEMA doesn't come after you. Yes, ma'am.
So I would maybe look to be someone like that, but we're looking to try and put a second story on, so therefore we haven't applied for a permit.
Wonderful. So we can talk about this separately. It's not the focus of this conversation, but if there's time tonight, we can get into that. What kind of resources may be becoming available down the road?
That's why we're waiting.
Yes, and some advice that I think, and yours is right, not to get repairs just yet, because grants may become available, and I know Commissioner, you and I have talked about that specifically as well. But again, if the damage assessment is less than 50%, you do not, then you can go straight to permit. You do not need an SISD package. So we're requiring the SISD package to approve that at under 50% value, or the damage assessment letter under 50%.
So one or the other.
It's one or the other. We're not gonna require both.
So you don't have an SISD and it's less than 50%.
If you don't have what we used to call the FEMA packet, the SISD review package, if you haven't done that, but you get a non-substantial damage letter, as long as your permits come in under that 50%, you still have to keep your permits under 50%. You do not have to do an SISD package.
So if I didn't get an SISD package, letter, will I get one?
You will get one if you're in a condo association. We talked about this earlier. We may need additional information from you. And that's the letter that's going out next week about what you may need to do. So get a structure value appraisal, those kinds of things. So but if you do have an SISD package, particularly in a single family home and you haven't received a letter, we'll still issue a permit. Okay? So, so we need one or the other, not both. Some cases, limited cases, if you're in that 45 to 50% range, we may need to come out and either do both or maybe come out and inspect your home prior to issuance of permit, just to make sure that, and that again is to protect you that you don't trip over that 50%. Yes, sir.
Do you know where the NFIP adjusters get the adjusted tax assessed value from?
That's the property appraiser's information. That's-
No, it's a different value than the Pinellas value, so I'm wondering where they got theirs from.
Well, this is the adjusted tax assessed value according to Tidal Basin. That is the Pinellas County Property Appraiser's FEMA wind loss mitigation value.
So there's different, so there's the title, there's the value the Tidal Basin might use, for their calculation. There's the value that Mr. Twitty might use in his letter. And I saw yet a different value that my NFIP adjuster used for his. And
And I'm so sorry, you did ask the NFIP adjuster. I don't know what they're using. I'm so sorry. I've not been on that side of it and I've never asked the question. So this is about doing the damage assessment for the substantial damage and non-substantial damage
They
letters.
all just have different values and they.
Yeah,
get them from different places.
And Tidal Basin is exclusively using the property appraiser's information in calculation of that 50%. Though there's other data that is spitting out, and Commissioner Robinson and I have been talking about it back and forth in email, that is what they're using to make a determination on structure value versus cost of repair.
And they all can get different values for what things cost and different values for what our houses are worth.
Based on condition and other, yes, that they're observing, yes. So appealing a damage determination. So if you've received the letters of substantial damage and the early ones did not have I guess they all had calculations for substantial damage. Or if you received a letter of non-substantial damage, you can appeal. So there certainly would be limited cases when you might wish to appeal a non-substantial damage determination. A couple of them surprises, quite honestly. Some people wanted to be determined substantially damaged because they planned to live their home and wanted to take advantage of the ICC provisions in their NFIP policy. And others, the assessment, we talked about the flaws in the assessment, indicated there was damage from flood, even though some property owners were telling us they had no water incursion. For those properties, we're doing a 0% damage from flooding evaluation. I mentioned this earlier, based on ground level elevation. And so we're going to be reissuing letters. Again, it's 523 property owners that are going to be receiving a letter soon, letting them know that they have 0% damage from flooding.
And you said that's if your elevation?
If your ground elevation is 7.2 feet or above. Because we have recorded flood values at 7.15, assuming there might be a little bit of wave action where water came in. But if it's 7.2 or below, it's 0% damage from flood.
How do you find out your property's elevation?
We'd have to look at what's known as the LiDAR data that we've received from the county. We have access to as well. We can look at that, but you can make an inquiry. The best approach is to send an email to the SD appeal, which is up here on the website. So send a note in there and just ask for that information. Even though you might not be appealing a determination, you can send in a note and we'll look it up for you.
Denise, is it possible to make that, just that information publicly available on the website? Is it
I'm sorry, what?
the elevation data that the city is using, the LiDAR
I mean,
data?
it's just the standard.
Is it in a map form or table form?
I actually have not seen the output. I know there were 3,800 properties on the list, but that includes condos on 6 floors, if you will. So ground elevation data, so there are 3,800 properties, only 523 of which are at ground level. So those are the ones that are going to be receiving that letter. I'm sure could make that available, but I'm not certain that that would be.
So the information that you got from the county was just which properties are above this elevation. It's not like it's a map showing what the elevation is in different parts of the city, right?
That's correct.
A lot
of
of times
times,
this not something that is used to in the SISD, that none of that means anything.
So in the SIC review package, which is actually
When
when they did the damage assessment.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, what we learned probably 6 weeks into this process with Tidal Basin is that they assumed an 8-foot elevation of flood. And that's true in the northern barrier islands. We were able to prove that they're at 7.03 to 7.15 is our documented height. Building official certified those flood elevations himself. And Tidal Basin was unable to go back and redo all of those. And so that's why we're now evaluating them independently and sending out these letters. So Tidal Basin presumed an 8-foot flood surge. And we have documented evidence to show it was up to 7.15.
But they don't take into account what level your house is at?
They do, yeah, so the data that we get, the NAVD, which is ground elevation data, that is incorporated into the damage assessment. But again, if you're assuming 8-foot flood surge and it was less than that, that's what's driving up some of these damage assessments as well, is it's based on a false assumption of flood water, unfortunately. But we're working through it, as I said, procuring that data separately and sending out letters recognizing that some people have got no flood damage, even though they may have initially received a letter indicating differently.
So are those letters only going out if you're below that?
If you're above 7.2 feet, we're going to be sending out those letters letting them know 0% damage from flood.
What I'm saying is if you don't get it, how do you know if you are or not? Because are they going to send a letter to everyone or just the people?
No, just to those people. It's Vina Del Mar is a neighborhood that will receive several of these letters in particular. And then there are some other places throughout the city as well that reach that elevation height. Yes, sir.
It came with the commissioner's question about the LiDAR. I mean, the state has a website, the county has a website, and even the city's website has all of our elevation certificates or some of our elevation certificates. And even though, for instance, I submitted my elevation certificate on an earlier permit, my elevation certificate isn't on the list of submitted ones. And I don't know if I'm being penalized because somehow it didn't make it to the, page, or if that's a bad thing or a good thing. I mean, I submitted it when I did my last permit, in 23, but when there's a page of, here's all our elevation certificates, it's not listed. I don't know if that's a bad thing or not.
So some of them indeed are not listed. We do have them in another file in our system. They're not listed on the website. I'm not entirely certain why, so that's a good question. But candidly, we had a data breach several years ago and lost most of the elevation certificates on file.
And then also, but so if we're free to distribute the elevation certificates, maybe we can do the LiDAR numbers too. But my other question that I had was, it's not for an appeal of damage determination, but for the packet formerly known as the FEMA packet, when we're providing our costs of doing the work, on the website, it says you can either use the so-and-so and so-and-so rating system, or whatever rating system your floodplain administrator likes that day, or some wording like that. What is the approved tables we can use when we're pricing our project?
So when pricing a project, we're using Bureau of Labor Statistics labor rate data that's indicated in the latest iteration of the SISD review package, how to find that information. Other cost data, again, the obligation of the building official is to make reasonable judgment. And so if you can provide the methodology that you use, then he will certainly review that. There are other books.
An official book, and then it said you have to use this official book or another one. So I was just wondering if he had another acceptable one that he liked.
Yeah, so that's like Marshall and Swift,
That was-
Craftsman book, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think the question,
Those
That's what I'm asking.
those two are industry standards and those are used, but if you use something different, then quite likely the building official is going to ask you what the
No, I don't want
methodology
to
was.
go. I don't want to go to be different. I'm asking what are the ones he likes, Marshall and
Those are it, and any other sources, he's gonna ask you what you use, but the industry standard are those two.
oh, I thought that was one book called Marshall and so. I thought that was one book.
Craftsman book and then Marshall and
Oh,
Swift.
I didn't.
There's also RS means.
Oh, RS means, thank you.
There's also RS means. The question I've been asking is whether we're accepting local builders.
And again, so when you're talking about appraisal,
Yes.
so the building official, these are both licensed officials, the appraiser, right, is a licensed professional. Building official is a licensed professional. And so the building official may not challenge an appraiser's review of your property. What the building official may challenge or may ask about is the methodology used and can challenge the methodology. Cannot challenge the appraisal itself, only the methodology. So that's the conversation that the building official will have with an appraisal if it comes through and it doesn't appear to be actual cash value depreciation based on the normal approach that we typically see producing those.
And
So-
Craftsman was the other one. It wasn't just Marshall and so, it was also
There's a
Craftsman.
Craftsman book.
I didn't see Craftsman. Okay.
Marshall and Swift, I believe, it used to be Marshall and Swift.
Yeah.
And that's what we have on the code.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, again, the appeal of damage estimate or determination, there are several reasons, as I said, where you might wish to appeal. Know that, this does not have to cost you any money, certainly. So you can appeal that. So you can appeal that simply by saying, hey, this is my SISD review package. These are the photos. These are the things that show you what kind of damage I have and the information that Tidal Basin may have provided to you to come up with this calculation is incorrect based on this information. So please know that appealing it doesn't mean you have to go spend money. For some homes, it will be beneficial because of they perhaps had 4 feet of flooding in their home. Some of those challenges, so an actual cash value appraisal may indeed be what's necessary in order to boost that structure value, thereby lowering the percentage of repair costs. Let me see. So substantial and non-substantial damage determination. So this is what we're seeing so far. As you can see, non-substantially damaged structures are, exceeding the number of substantially damaged. As I shared with commission last night, based on the appeals that we're seeing, I'm quite confident that the percentage will go down, substantially on the substantially damaged structures overall, once we get through the appeals process. So what's new, commissioners, that we're doing, effective today is I've asked our data team, the information that we're receiving from Tidal Basin, to take the extra step to look for any permit applications that may have come in, to look for an actual cash value appraisal or an SISD review package that has been conditionally approved. If we can grab a structure value off one or other document and effectively show that it's less than 50%, then we will issue a non-substantially damaged determination rather than substantial damage based on Tidal Basin data. So hopefully that will reduce certainly anxiety, but the number of appeals as well. What that will mean is, you know, it will add a little bit of time on our data team to go in and look for that kind of information and appropriately document it in the file that we've effectively done an administrative appeal internally before issuing the letter.
So what you're saying is people can, if they already have their actual cash value, their independent appraisal in lieu of anything right now, they can go ahead and submit that does that need to accompany the appeal letter or anything at all?
It can appeal, so if they've not done anything in terms of submitting for a permit or we don't have anything else,
Should
they
receive
can,
a permit.
right, they can submit that with the appeal document. If they've already submitted it, we're not gonna go backward in time looking for these, but going forward, we're gonna take that new approach that I just described. But if they've already submitted documentation for a permit and they have an SISD package or an appraisal already in our system, we ask that you provide us the permit number so that we can easily find it and pull that information and then issue a reversal on that determination to get to non-substantial status.
We don't have a list anywhere of all these acronyms you.
I'm so
That would
sorry.
be so helpful because, you know,
Government
people are
speak.
dealing with so many different
I
things.
know.
And then to try to recall every one of these acronyms when they're listed out gets a bit difficult at times, so.
You know, I bet I know what the city manager is writing down. Are you
Yeah.
doing an acronym cheat sheet?
We'll take a picture of that for you, Liz. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I have to produce it first.
Before the storm starts.
Pardon me?
So it would have been nice to have it
Yeah.
before the storm started.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I should have a little dictionary in on the website.
Some commonly used terms, Mark, that we need to put up there. Yeah, so we are all learning a new language, that is for sure. Some of you may know I just started with the city on September 30th? Yes. Right. That is the right date, right? I almost jumped to October 30th, but it was September 30th. And I had never heard of the FEMA 50% rule. So I can imagine how many of you, these are all new words and terms, and I'm living in this now, as are you, albeit in a different way. So I apologize for all the acronyms, but we'll get a cheat sheet out. What other questions might you have?
If someone has effective repairs, did not pull permits, and they come back out and go through the process, they get their ACV, they get the appraisal, and they present that at the same time. What's the acronym I'm looking for? That they're, in other words, when they come
Actual
in.
cash value?
Yeah, actual cash value, they're gonna attach the copy of the appraisal that the appraiser, provided them with. Is that sufficient for that part of the process? And then let's say, then you've got to come back out, do the re-inspects on the items that were done, I don't say hastily, but were done because they thought they needed to have them done. What are there penalties or fines that go on top of this? Are you waiving any of that due to the situations that people are in? That would be interesting to hear, some
Yeah,
material.
so currently and now through April 22nd, there are no permit or plans examination fees. There is a Florida surcharge, it's very nominal, and that's on the permit process.
Mhm.
We are currently not charging for stop work orders work without permit to residents. To
Okay.
contractors, there is a penalty.
Mhm.
They are licensed professionals and know better.
Yeah, they should.
We're also reporting them to PCCLB. for inappropriate contracting work. So, to answer your question, no, there are no penalties currently.
Okay.
I don't know when that amnesty, if you will end. What's most important to us is that you're protected and that your investment is protected most assuredly. You know, certainly if you ever wish to sell your home, you're gonna need to show that the work was permitted, that's a given. We understand many people were certainly desperate and anxious to get back in their home, and that work may have been conducted that would require a permit. So as I said earlier, there are numerous ways in which it's gonna become evident that that a permit was not pulled, but we have evidence to support that there was damage. And so if we're not talking to you now, we're gonna have to knock on your door at some point, unfortunately. And again, you know, a lot of consternation about FEMA and all of their rules, and I live with all of these rules too. It's a hefty load, and so I can only imagine. And my whole professional career for the last 12 years has been mired in federal regulation. So I probably have a high level of tolerance for it, but I can well imagine how folks such as yourselves, this is overwhelming, and I can appreciate that. But do know that FEMA, for all of the headaches that it's causing us today, what the big risk is, and there's certainly been a lot of conversation with commission about this, is that if we lose our community rating system eligibility, our ability to participate in that, what goes away is in the next event, and hopefully not in our lifetimes, but there will be a next event, FEMA will not come in and do debris removal, and all of the millions of dollars that they provided to us in removing debris, that we did not have to pay for, then comes out of your property taxes here. So not only that, but business owners would not be able to avail themselves of SBA loans. Following a disaster, SBA loans are also made available to homeowners to provide loans for cost of repair. And you would not be able to get an FDIC insured mortgage. So that would effectively turn this entire real estate market into an all cash economy, which would be devastating. And quite honestly, I think we would lose the character of this community and neighborhood if what we saw coming in was all investors who really have no history, knowledge, or love for this community as you all do. So we really are our interests as community officials, employees, certain elected officials, is to make sure that we retain this community and support the residents in the best way we can, even though we all have to experience this extraordinarily difficult process.
So if you didn't get the permits prior to the repairs, can you then, upon inspection, get permits for those repairs?
You can apply for a permit at any time. Just let us know what's going on. We can come out there and tell you what it is that we're gonna need to do, but you can go ahead and submit your permit and just put it in the narrative, and we'll come in and take a look and just tell you what you're probably gonna have to remove. So very typically, so let's say you had water come in and you probably had to remove drywall, trim, your electrical, let's assume that for a moment that got wet, your cabinetry, etc. So there are typically 4 inspections that we see in those kinds of situations. Roof and other things require different inspections, but what we're seeing is rough electrical. That is prior to putting in any drywall. Then there's drywall. That is a screw inspection. So Florida Building Code requires the spacing of screws at certain distances, number of screws in that drywall. That's before you put plaster on that. So there's a drywall screw inspection, and then there's final electrical and final, I'm skipping out on something. There's another inspection. Thank you. So the rough plumbing, final plumbing. So some different inspections there, but the most that we're seeing certainly is rough electrical and drywall screw inspections, and then final. And I think that's surprising a lot of people. I will share with you, as owner builders, it is your obligation. You are acting as a contractor. It is your obligation to know the rules when it comes to the required inspections. So even if we don't tell you, and we hope to tell you what these inspections will be, ignorance of the law does not absolve you from your responsibility of it. So unfortunately, right, that's like, I didn't see the speed limit sign. But so do know that, do your research. Google's great, AI assistant is popping up and telling you the types of inspections you might need, but do your research, talk to your neighbors, give us a call, find out. Certainly ask at the permit desk. In fact, I was having a conversation earlier. I think we're gonna do, we have it on our website, the types of inspections that are typically required, that information is available. So I encourage you to go to the website, click on the click here for the hurricane rebuild and repair, and review all of that information, and then ask more questions if you have them.
This
But
is
you'll
just
find out
all
the types
turn-
of inspections.
This
that we
seems to be
do.
a small turnout for the amount of people I would have expected, you know, to have seen here tonight. So on the ideas list, though, it would be very, I would think, helpful to many people to get a larger crowd than this, to have one of your inspectors here that comes
Well, I
out
think
and
what you're not
issues the
seeing is the
permit.
fact that most people have already submitted their
Yeah, I
permits.
guess so, yeah.
So now that we're
You're
better than
beyond that
2/3,
point where it's probably helpful for you.
down, you know, we're just getting down to the wire, which is why even last night we encourage everyone,
Yeah.
whether your friend who's doing
Right.
unpermitted work or whether it's your
Right.
neighbor who hasn't gotten around to it,
Right.
you've got until April 14th, so get your permits in.
Get by before.
Stop, you know, whatever, even if it's, as Denise may have mentioned last night, actually, as you mentioned last night, even if it's, you know, incomplete, get it
Right.
submitted, so at least
Right.
it's on the record as having
Yeah.
come in before before April 14th.
Yeah, so if it's in the
Thank you for
queue
extra.
before the fees expire, we'll still honor that. So if it's in the system, then we have an issue date.
Next, thank you.
Denise, on the appeals process for folks who have, maybe they got a letter that said 52 or 57 or maybe even 62. Is there a way, like how friendly is the appeal process as far as if somebody goes, well, gosh, I'm barely over 50%, and if they were assuming my floors were damaged and I have terrazzo or tile, that probably gets me under. But they don't really know what assumptions went into that. So can they appeal just based on that? Get a response and then at that point, go get an appraisal if they need one?
It is, and I would say that that's probably a very difficult way for us to review an appeal, because we then have to go through and do an entirely new calculation, and that's time consuming. Probably the better approach is to show photographs and the SISD package, if completed. That's the better, and I say that because most people have done an SISD package. I will say that a lot of these SISD packages at the start of this, we were talking about a lot of deficiencies and you know, the DIY costs and things, because there's so much confusion about that. When we get those kinds of packages in there, the building official has the authority to make an assumption on what those costs are. And so, for instance, we had a permit valuation come in the other day for $73,000, but they had no tear out and remediation costs, and we applied a dollar value to that, increased the permit value, but did not require a revised SISD package. So that there is a way that we can do that, but probably the SISD is gonna be the faster way to do that.
Yeah.
But you know, I can talk with the team to figure out if, you know, going forward at some point, if we can look at maybe, you know, some of those interesting other ways, such as you suggested, where we go in and look at what did Tidal Basin say about the floor damage, and can we get there just amending that assumption?
Yeah, no, that would, if you only had 10 to do, it would be easy, but when you have
More than 10.
more than 10, yeah.
Yeah. What else can I ask for you? So this,
I don't know if everything's done, but I am interested in hearing anything about grants.
yeah, so housing recovery, if you'll go on the website, there is a housing recovery resources webpage on there now. Oh, good, good. So for the benefit of those on Zoom, which I don't know if we have more than 10, but, so we do have a housing recovery support page. There are grants that we believe will be made available. The city is not an applicant. The state is an applicant to the federal government. So Florida Division of Emergency Management is putting together applications now. So what that required is a lot of data from all of us that are affected. That gets baked into ultimately an application. They send it to FEMA. FEMA then awards funds for there's two different grant programs that they're applying for. It's Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, or HMGP, to give you another acronym.
Well, there you go.
And there is the the flood mitigation assistance Swift Current program, FMA Swift Current. So one of them, and I think it's the FMA program, requires that you're an NFIP policy holder, but I believe both programs require that if you're going to elevate your home, no repairs can be done to your home prior to applying for or receiving that grant. So kudos to you, because it's evident that you may have done some research on that. I would suggest though minimal repair permits to put electricity in your home so you can occupy your home if it's safe to occupy. Okay, then, right, so that is, so for those homeowners that are considering elevating their home and wish to avail themselves of grants, and I'm hearing that these grants can be upwards of $300,000 potentially. They used to have a cap of 200,000. I'm being told that that will be perhaps as high as 300,000. Of course, I don't know because there's no grant award has been, received. But I am hearing that it's very substantial funds to support the elevation or lifting or building above floodplain. But for those that are considering that, you can in fact do minimal repair to safely occupy your home while figuring out what you're going to do or while waiting for grant money. So for those that are wishing to elevate, they still can't, there is still a pathway where they can occupy their home while they wait for these funds. Unfortunately, we're told it can be 12 to 18 months before these funds become available. What you can do on the web page though, there's a URL there to sign up for information. I heard in mid-December that they were going to open up the grant portal for homeowners to be able to begin the application process, even though those funds have not been awarded to the state, just to get in the queue. I have not heard that grant portal has opened up, but do pay attention to that so you can get early in line for potential grants. Yes,
So if I signed up, they should let me know.
they should let you know. Yeah, yes, they should.
And then do you know, when they consider elevate, because is it just lifting or is it putting a second story on? So they give you a grant for putting a second story on, because that's what I prefer.
I can't speak to what they may be because no parameters have been set. But elevating, of course, can be lifting depending on your home structure. Engineer would have to determine that. It can be demolishing and rebuilding above the floodplain. It can be abandoning first floor and building above if the structure allows for that. So several options there about how to become compliant. And I would imagine of those two programs, at least one of them would be available to support any of those efforts, but I don't know that for certain.
All right, thank you, everyone. We appreciate you all coming tonight. They were all here till 1:30 last night. Okay.
Oh my gosh. God
So,
bless you.
it's they're all here again way past their bedtime. So I appreciate you all coming out.
Definitely my bedroom.
That's right. Appreciate you all coming out. If you do have any specific questions beyond this, that are specific to your property.
Yes.
Right, just send, you have the email right up there. You go ahead and send those to the building department. What's that email?
SD appeal
SD appeal.
@stbeach.org.
That's
I do have appeal forms back there, so if anybody is at that phase, they are back there.
great. All right, thank you, everyone.
I'm also doing on Monday, we're closed, the city is closed, but I'm gonna have this chamber open on Monday from 10 to 11:30, and Joanne Boylan from Permanning is gonna be in here with me, and we're gonna just do kind of a 101, walk through. We'll have the forms and everything and kind of walk through the appeal process for those that are 50% or higher.
Right,
Because anybody 50% or lower, it's gonna fall into a clerical thing.
correct.
Us, 50% or higher, kind of walk you through it. If you don't have one yet, feel free to come.
Right.
It's, I'm District 2, but it's open for everybody here. So, Boland,